Resuming debate, the honourable member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honour to rise today to speak in support of motion M73 put forward by my colleague, the honourable member for Kitchener-South Hespeler. And I might just mention, Mr. Speaker, that I had the honour of representing a good portion of the riding which my colleague currently represents, but due to the redistribution in the last electoral distribution, I now have the honour of working next door to my colleague. Let me read motion 73. That in the opinion of the House, the government should recognize the contributions that German Canadians have made to Canadian society, the richness of the German language and culture, and the importance of educating and reflecting upon German heritage for future generations, and that Waterloo Region is host to the largest Oktoberfest outside of Germany by declaring October every year German Heritage Month, and the 9 days commencing the Friday before Thanksgiving every year, Oktoberfest. Mr. Speaker, I will focus my remarks primarily on the first part of the motion. I'm honoured to speak in support of this motion because of its content, and I'm also proud of my own German heritage. My ancestors arrived in Canada around 1850, Mr. Speaker. In 2011, the census results report that 28,490 of my constituents indicated that they were of German ethnic origin. That's about 31% of my riding. Almost one-third of my riding shares my German heritage. And this is something which has contributed greatly to the fact that the riding of Kitchener-Conestoga is, in fact, the very best riding in all of Canada. Thank you. Germans who report their ethnic origin as solely or partly from Germany or are of German ancestry are one of Canada's largest ethnic categories of European origin. In 2006, over 3 million people in Canada reported German as their ethnic origin. In 2011, 430,000 people in Canada reported German as their mother tongue. Canada's Germans have come from virtually every East European country: Asiatic Russia, the United States, Latin America. German colonists have been migrating to Eastern Europe since the Middle Ages and to colonial America since 1683. Canada's main source of German immigration was Russia, especially from the Volga, the Black Sea coast, and Volhynia. Some of the religious allegiances represented in this group are Mennonite, Hutterite, Lutheran, Roman Catholic, Baptist, Moravian, and Jewish. The mother tongue includes High German, Low German, Pennsylvania Dutch, and numerous regional dialects. I remember well, Mr. Speaker, listening to my parents' dialogue in Pennsylvania Dutch. I remember hearing conversations in Pennsylvania Dutch between my parents and my uncles and aunts and neighbors who would come to our farm to help with work, threshing grain together, participating in quilting bees in our home, or watching a barn raising in our community as neighbors came together to rebuild barns after destruction by fire. While I didn't understand every word they said, I knew by their smiles and laughter that in the midst of their hard work, they enjoyed working together as a community. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, if there are two defining elements that I think define those of Germanic descent, it's hard work and teamwork. Defining characteristics of the German immigrants who came to Canada and especially to Waterloo Region, whether it was threshing together or, as I said earlier, in a quilting bee. Still today, these values of collaboration are very strong. In fact, the current Governor General, when he was president of the University of Waterloo, would often comment about the barn-raising spirit in Waterloo Region. And I think that's largely as a result of the German ancestors who settled in our area. I want to focus a bit on the story of the German Mennonite communities that emigrated from Pennsylvania. These pacifist Anabaptist farmers fled the fervor of American nationalism and sought land for their growing population. Preferring cohesive settlement, they acquired a huge tract of land in Waterloo County. Through chain migration, they transplanted their families and Pennsylvania German culture. Their Waterloo County colony, with a hub community named Berlin, developed into an area of concentrated German settlement. From there, German settlements spread to Perth, Huron, Bruce, and Grey counties. In 1916, during the First World War, what was known as Berlin changed its name to Kitchener, when citizens, especially business owners, wanted to combat any perception of disloyalty due to its sizable German-speaking population. In the Second World War, Kitchener was the site of a training camp for the Canadian Women's Army Corps. In the aftermath of Second World War, Kitchener and its citizens led the nation in first welcoming new German refugees who fled or were expelled from Eastern Europe, Romania, Yugoslavia, Poland, and the Soviet Union. It has since retained its place as one of the centres in Canada most likely to receive refugees, aided by its vibrant local economy. And I would like to add, Mr. Speaker, that this past year, through the resettlement of Syrian refugees, it's been very encouraging to see again the same level of generosity from the Waterloo region that was shown nearly over 70 years ago. Let me now share a few personal stories about local organizations and the townships and towns that make up the Waterloo region, and you will see from the names and the characteristics of these villages the strong German heritage. Berlin, as I said it earlier, Berlin changed its name to Kitchener as a result of the First World War and not wanting to appear disloyal to Canada. A little town called Maryhill in my constituency used to be called New Germany, previously renamed Maryhill. Heidelberg, New Hamburg, I'll talk more about New Hamburg later, St. Jacobs, Shinglestettel, or Shingletown, Schmittsville, which was renamed to Wellesley, Baden, named after Baden-Baden in Germany. Recently in Baden, we installed the first statue of previous Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, and all 28 previous Prime Ministers will have a statue installed in the town of Baden at Castle Kilbride, which is the township office for the Wilmot Township in my riding. So I'm proud of that new icon that we will have right in my riding, which it will be a tourist destination for sure. Another village called Strasbourg, Mannheim. You can see from the names of these villages, Mr. Speaker, the strong German heritage in my riding and in the Waterloo region. Companies in my area, Ontario Drive and Gear, started by an immigrant from Germany, now working on things like the lunar rover for NASA and the Canadian Space Agency. Schneider's Meats, which has been an icon in our community for years. ATS, started by a person of German heritage. The German Remembrance Society and many other German clubs in our area do a great job of preserving our German heritage. We have the Canadian Business Association, German-Canadian Business Association. We have the Alpine Club, German-Canadian Hunting and Fishing Club in Mannheim, the Transylvania Club, Schwaben Club, Concordia Club, German Pioneers Day, where each year we celebrate people of German ancestry who have contributed greatly to the economy in the Waterloo region. And as my colleague mentioned, Christkindl Market at Christmas each year, which is coming up shortly. Let me now return just for a moment, Mr. Speaker, to some of the towns I mentioned earlier, and the town of New Hamburg. Obviously, from the name New Hamburg, you can tell that's a German origin. New Hamburg is popular and known for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons that I'm proud to be part of New Hamburg is because of Howie Meeker, a former NHL star who played for the Toronto Maple Leafs for 9 seasons. And actually, while he was a player for the Toronto Maple Leafs, served here in Parliament as a member of Parliament for Waterloo South, which is the predecessor to the riding I currently represent. And I was honored to be with Mr. Meeker, with the Governor General when he received the Governor General's honor, the Order of Canada. New Hamburg is also, as I mentioned, home to Ontario Drive and Gear, a company that produces all-terrain vehicles, the Argo, and it's also doing work for NASA on the lunar rover. Oak Grove Cheese in New Hamburg. Mr. Speaker, you may not have heard of Limburger cheese, but Oak Grove Cheese Company is one of the only cheese factories in all of North America that continues to produce Limburger cheese. Now, I never developed a taste for Limburger cheese. My dad enjoyed it immensely, but maybe that's one of the reasons I didn't, because the smell was, well, not the greatest, I'll say the least. St. Jacobs is another town in my riding that is famous for the farmers market, popular tourist destination. Walter Hackborn, of German ancestry, was the person who started Home Hardware. Started in 1963. He got a number of independent hardware dealers together and said we should form an association. And today, Home Hardware, which is headquartered in St. Jacobs in my riding, has a network of over 1,100 stores across Canada. And their headquarters and distribution center is still in St. Jacobs. The little town of Schmittsville, which is currently called Wellesley. I'm just going to read a bit that I found on the internet. Prior to the 20th century, the area was home to doctors, blacksmiths, and merchants, as well as a tannery, hotels, and churches. Into the early 1900s, the village carriage and wagon maker George Diefenbaker, his preferred spelling was with an extra C, would entertain his grandson, John Diefenbaker, each summer in the little town of Wellesley in my riding. Another little town that you've never heard of is Punky Doodle's Corner. Punky Doodle's Corner is on the far west of my riding, and it's known for its quaint name, not for any specific significant settlement, but it's a tiny hamlet situated where Oxford and Perth counties intersect with Waterloo County, and the Huron Road passed through this locale in the late 19th century and had a blacksmith shop and a tavern where it was said that the German tavern keeper sang his version of Yankee Doodle, which came out sounding like Punky Doodle, and that's where the name came from. Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage my colleagues to support this motion. I think you'll see from the comments he's made and the ones I've made that we can be proud of our German ancestry and the immense contribution that the German community has made to Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate.